I was never a paranoid man. Never the type to check my wife's phone, never the kind to wonder where she was when she said she was out with friends. But that night, something snapped into place, like a puzzle I hadn't realized I was solving. A tiny shift in the air, a wrong note in the melody of our lives. It was the way she came home, too casual, too rehearsed. Jessica wasn't a great liar. She thought she was, but she had tells. She always had. The way she tossed her bag on the counter, immediately went to the fridge for a drink, took a long sip before even looking at me. A performance. I watched her. Just watched. She didn't ask how my day was. She didn't mention the dinner I'd left for her in the oven. Instead, she pulled out her phone and typed something fast. A little smirk. A quiet laugh. And then, this was the kicker, she turned slightly away from me, like her body was instinctively shielding the screen. A thick, hot wave of something ugly rolled through me. Suspicion. A feeling I hated, but one I couldn't shake. "Good night," she said, already walking toward the stairs. Not a kiss, not even a touch. I waited, let the silence settle around the house. I didn't even move for a few minutes. Just stared at the spot where she had been. My mind was a storm, images flashing through it, possibilities I didn't want to entertain, but couldn't stop. And then I did something I had never done before. I walked up the stairs, slow and careful, keeping my steps light. Outside our bedroom door, I listened, soft rustling, the faint tap of fingers against the screen, a sharp, quiet inhale, like someone had just read something that excited them. I turned the handle, stepping inside. Jessica was lying on her side, phone held low, screen dimmed. She glanced up, her face smooth, unreadable. "What?" she said, blinking at me like I was the one acting strange. I didn't answer. I just crossed the room, sat on the edge of the bed, watching her. She held on to that act for a few seconds longer, then sighed, locking her phone. "Jesus, you're acting weird," she said. "What were you laughing at earlier?" I frowned. "What?" "When you came in, you laughed at something on your phone." "What was it? Some dumb meme?" A heartbeat passed. A test. "Show me." Her entire body went rigid. It lasted half a second, maybe less, but I caught it. The way her hand tightened around her phone, the way her jaw locked before she forced a casual smile. "That's ridiculous," she said, rolling her eyes and tossing the phone onto the nightstand. "Are you seriously asking to see my phone right now?" "Yes." Her laugh was sharp, quick. "Wow, okay. Someone's insecure." I didn't blink. Didn't move. Just waited. She huffed, picked up the phone, and held it out, but something about the way she did it was too fast, too eager. And then I knew. I grabbed it before she could react, turning the screen toward me. My pulse was a war drum. Nothing. Her messages were clean. Too clean. She hadn't just locked it, she had wiped it. Jessica reached for the phone, but I pulled it back, staring at the blank message history. And then I saw it. The very top of the screen. A tiny, barely their status update, chat backup completed 3 minutes ago. My wife had just erased her messages right before I walked into the room. I stared at that little notification like it was a gun pointed at my head. 3 minutes ago, just before I walked in. That was all I needed to see. My stomach twisted. My vision sharpened, and suddenly, everything in the room felt fake. The soft lamp light, the clean sheets, the woman lying next to me pretending like nothing was wrong. Jessica's face barely flickered, but I knew she saw it too. She saw what I saw. And yet she still had the audacity to tilt her head, let out a sharp little laugh, and say, "Are you seriously spying on me right now?" I turned the phone toward her, pointing at the backup notification. "Spying? No, Jess. I'm just wondering why you wiped your messages the second you got home." She didn't even blink. "Oh my God, you're being insane." That was it. That was her defense. Not a denial, not an explanation, just gaslighting. Flipping it back on me like I was the crazy one. I inhaled slowly through my nose, forcing my hands to stay steady. Who's Mike? It was quick, but it was there. Her lips parted just a fraction. Her pupils shrank. Her fingers curled in the sheets. But Jessica was fast, too fast. She scoffed, shaking her head like I was a complete idiot. What are you talking about? I opened my mouth, ready to shove her lies straight down her throat, but then she did something I didn't expect. She smiled. Not a nervous smile, not an apologetic one, a smirk. A knowing, smug little smirk, as if she had already decided how this would go. I felt something snap in my chest. Never mind, I said, tossing the phone onto the bed. I'll just check the backup myself. Jessica shot up, but I was already walking toward my office. It's easy. It takes just a few minutes to restore a backup. I heard her feet hit the floor behind me, heard her voice pitch up, that desperate edge creeping in. Are you seriously going to invade my privacy like this? I didn't answer. I was already unlocking my laptop, already pulling up the software to restore deleted messages. My hands moved fast, methodical, because at this point, I wasn't looking for proof anymore. I knew she knew I knew. Jessica's voice sharpened. Wow, you're such a control freak. I ignored her, clicking through the steps. Just a few more seconds. Then suddenly, she grabbed the laptop. Not just grabbed, she ripped it off the desk. For half a second, I thought she was going to smash it, but instead, she clutched it to her chest, panting, her eyes wide and furious. Are you out of your mind? She snapped. And that's when I saw it. Not regret, not guilt. No. I saw fear. Jessica was scared of what I was about to find. And that's how I knew, whatever she was hiding, it was so much worse than just some flirty texts. Jessica stood there, gripping my laptop like it was her lifeline, her chest rising and falling too fast, her fingers tied around the edges. She knew she had overplayed her hand. A guilty person denies, distracts, maybe cries, but they don't snatch away the evidence unless they're terrified of what it will reveal. I let the silence stretch between us, heavy, suffocating. I let her feel it, pressing down on her. Then, calmly I said, "Give it back." She didn't move. I stepped forward. Now, Jessica? Still nothing. She just stared at me, like she was trying to figure out whether to double down or run. I could almost see the gears turning, could almost hear her debating whether she could lie her way out of this. But then she did something I didn't expect. She laughed. Not a nervous giggle, not an awkward chuckle, a full, genuine laugh, like I had just told the funniest joke in the world. I froze. Jessica wiped a fake tear from her eye, shaking her head. You really think you're in control here, don't you? A cold feeling crawled up my spine. She set my laptop down on the desk like it was worthless, crossing her arms. God, you're pathetic. Snooping through my phone like some desperate little boy. There it was again, that smirk. That arrogant, condescending smirk that said she wasn't scared anymore. That she thought she had already won. I didn't take the bait. I kept my voice steady. Who is Mike? She scoffed. I don't owe you an explanation. My fingers clenched into fists. I exhaled slowly through my nose. Yes, you do. She shrugged. All right, fine. You want to know? He's someone who actually makes me feel alive, unlike you. The words hit like a brick to the chest, but I refused to flinch. Jessica tilted her head, studying me like I was some pitiful, clueless fool. You're so damn boring now, you know that? Same old routine, same old conversations. I needed more. She smiled. And Mike? He gives me more. A slow, steady rage crawled up my throat, but I forced it down. How long? Her eyes gleamed. Long enough. I swallowed hard, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. Have you been with him in my house? Jessica held my gaze, and then with a small, deliberate pause, she said, What do you think? Everything inside me fractured. The world around me narrowed, sound muffling. My vision sharpened on her face. The face of a woman who had just destroyed 11 years of my life and didn't even have the decency to pretend she felt bad about it. And then she smiled wider, like she was enjoying this. like she wanted me to break. But she had no idea. I don't break. I just get even. A slow calm settled over me, the kind that comes right before a storm. Jessica was watching me, waiting for me to explode, waiting for some dramatic reaction she could use against me. But I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. Instead, I smiled. A slow, deliberate smile. Jessica's smirk twitched, just barely, a flicker of doubt. She expected rage, yelling, maybe even begging. Not this. I stepped toward her, closing the space between us. Not fast, not aggressive, just enough to make her shift, just enough to make her second-guess whatever power trip she thought she was on. Then I leaned in, my voice quiet. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Her lips parted. I saw it again, fear. A flash of it before she masked it with another snark, rolling her eyes. Oh please, what are you going to do? Cry. I didn't blink. Didn't move. Just let her words hang between us. Let her sit in the weight of them. Jessica was bluffing hard. She wanted me to believe she didn't care, that she had all the control. But people who don't care don't panic and delete their messages. People who don't care don't grab laptops out of desperation. She was scared. And that meant she had something, a lot, to lose. So I nodded. All right then. I turned and walked away. Jessica frowned. Wait. That's it. I didn't answer. I just kept walking, down the stairs, into the kitchen, opening the... I took out a bottle of water from the fridge like I didn't have a care in the world. Jessica appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. What are you doing? I took a slow sip. Oh, don't worry about it. She hesitated. No, seriously. What the hell are you doing? I set the bottle down, meeting her eyes. You'll see. And for the first time tonight, Jessica looked truly unsettled. Good. I grabbed my phone and made a call. Jessica's posture straightened. Who are you calling? I held up a finger, waited, then smiled. Hey man, you busy? Jessica's face drained of color because she knew exactly who I was calling. Her father. Jessica's face twisted into something ugly, shock, panic, fury, all in a single moment. Her mouth opened, but for once in her life, she didn't have words. Her father picked up on the second ring. Hey son. Everything all right? I locked eyes with Jessica as I spoke. Actually, no. Can you come over? A beat of silence. Then a slight shift in his tone. What happened? Jessica lunged forward, trying to snatch the phone out of my hand, but I stepped back, keeping it just out of reach. You'll want to hear this in person, I said, my voice calm, almost casual. Trust me. Jessica's fingers curled into fists. Are you serious? I ignored her. How soon can you be here? Her father exhaled sharply. Give me 20 minutes. Perfect. I ended the call. Jessica was already seething. What the hell do you think you're doing? I set my phone down, stretching my arms like I had all the time in the world. Oh, I don't know. Just inviting the man who paid for our wedding, co-signed on our house, and thinks his daughter is a saint to come have a little chat. Her nostrils flared. You're a piece. I laughed. No, Jess. I'm just getting started. She ran her hands through her hair, pacing like a caged animal. You're blowing this way out of proportion. I tilted my head. Am I? I mean, you weren't exactly subtle deleting your messages the second you walked through the door. Her face twitched. You don't have proof of anything. I grinned. Oh, sweetheart, I don't need proof. I just need your reaction. Jessica stopped pacing. I saw a click in her mind, the realization, the cold creeping dread of knowing she had already lost. Because her father wasn't stupid. He knew his daughter. He knew when she was lying. And most importantly, he hated liars. Jessica tried to regroup, switching tactics. You really want to do this? You want to ruin everything over nothing? I raised an eyebrow. Nothing? You sure about that? 'Cause 5 minutes ago, you were laughing in my face, bragging about how Mike gives you more. A muscle in her jaw twitched. She hated that I was calm. That I wasn't raging, wasn't losing my mind, wasn't playing into her game. I leaned against the counter. You know, you had a chance to fix this. You could have denied it, cried, maybe even begged. But instead you smiled. You mocked me. I shook my head, pretending to be disappointed. Not very smart, Jess. Her breath came out sharp. You want to humiliate me? Fine. But just remember, you're the one who has to explain why his wife doesn't want him anymore. I didn't even flinch. Oh, don't worry. I'll make sure he knows exactly why. A car pulled into the driveway. Jessica's face went pale. The headlights cut through the window, sweeping across the kitchen as the car came to a stop. Jessica stood frozen, her breathing shallow, her hands clenched at her sides. She wasn't smirking now. I smiled. Showtime. She spun toward me, her voice low and sharp. Don't do this. I shrugged. Too late. A car door slammed outside. Heavy, confident footsteps crunched up the driveway. Jessica's father, Richard Caldwell, a man who prided himself on honor, discipline, and family, a man who spent his entire life believing his daughter was a good person, was about to find out the truth. Jessica grabbed my arm, nails digging into my skin. Listen to me. I turned my head slowly, meeting her eyes. No, Jess. You listen to me. I leaned in just enough to watch her flinch. You thought you could play games with me. You thought you were smarter. But here's the thing, I don't lose. And now you're going to find out what it feels like to have everything ripped out from under you. A knock. Jessica swallowed hard, her grip tightening. I yanked my arm free. The door swung wide, and there he was. Richard stepped inside, his towering frame filling the doorway. His sharp eyes bounced between us. What's going on? I didn't speak right away. I let the tension settle, let the weight of it fill the room. I saw the way Richard's brows furrowed, the way his gaze flicked to Jessica, already sensing something was off. Jessica plastered on a shaky smile. Dad, it's nothing, really. He's just being dramatic. Richard didn't buy it, not even for a second. He turned to me. Tell me what's going on. I exhaled slowly, then spoke the words that hung in the air like a gunshot. Jessica's been cheating on me. Jessica jerked forward. That is not. She deleted her messages the second she walked through the door, tried to take my laptop when I went to recover them, then laughed in my face and admitted everything. I folded my arms. That about sum it up, Jess? Jessica's eyes burned into mine, her lips pressed into a thin, furious line. She wanted to deny it, but she couldn't. Not with her father standing there, his expression darkening by the second. Richard's face turned to stone. Jessica, tell me the truth. She hesitated, just for a second. But a second was all it took. Because Richard knew his own daughter. Hesitated, and that was all the proof he needed. The silence that followed was suffocating. Jessica's breathing turned shallow, her hands shaking. Dad, Richard took a step forward, his voice eerily calm. How long? Jessica flinched. Richard's jaw tightened. How long? She swallowed, then her voice was barely above a whisper. A few months. A quiet, controlled breath left Richard's nose. Then you ungrateful little. He stopped himself, closing his eyes for a brief second to rein himself in. I spent my whole damn life teaching you about loyalty, respect, and this is what you do? Jessica shrank back. I had never seen her like this before, small, weak, cornered. Richard turned to me, his voice heavy. What do you want to do? I let the silence drag, let Jessica feel the weight of it. Let her heart race with the fear of what was coming next. And then, calmly I said, I want her gone. Jessica's breath hitched. Wait, what? I stared at her, my voice even. I want you out of my house. Tonight. She blinked, her mouth opening, then closing, like she couldn't process the words. Richard nodded. I'll make sure she leaves. Jessica snapped. You can't be serious. This is my house too. Richard turned to her, his face cold. Not anymore. Jessica stumbled back. Dad, you can't just... I paid for this house, Jessica. His voice was quiet, but it hit like a hammer. And I will personally make sure the deed is in his name before the week is over. She froze. I swear, I saw the exact moment she realized she had just lost everything. Jessica's lips parted, her chest rose and fell rapidly. Then she did what she always did, she tried to manipulate. She turned to me, her eyes welling up with fake tears. Baby, please. I made a mistake. Her voice softened, dripping with desperation. I still love you. I just stared at her, unmoved, unshaken. Done. And then I said the last thing she ever expected to hear. Too bad. Richard grabbed her arm. Get your things, Jessica. You're leaving. And for the first time since this all started, Jessica finally looked scared. She yanked her arm away from her father, wild-eyed and desperate. Her entire body coiled like a trapped animal. For the first time tonight, she had nowhere to run. Her gaze flicked between me and Richard, calculating, searching for an opening, some way to talk her way out of this. But there wasn't one. Not this time. You can't just throw me out like this, she hissed. This is my home too. Richard's stare was ice-cold. Not anymore. Jessica turned to me, her voice trembling, whether from anger or fear, I couldn't tell. You wouldn't really do this to me, would you? I just smiled. Oh, Jess, I didn't do this to you. You did this to yourself. Her face flushed red, her breathing sharp and erratic. For once in her life, she was losing control, and she hated it. She hated me for taking it from her. Then, just like that, her expression shifted. Her whole demeanor changed. Posture softening, lips parting, her eyes shining with something almost like regret. The performance of a lifetime. Please, she whispered, taking a slow step toward me. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But don't do this. Don't throw everything away over one mistake. I almost laughed. One mistake? I could still hear her voice from earlier, dripping with cruelty. Mike gives me more. The way she smirked, the way she enjoyed tearing me down. And now, just minutes later, she expected me to forget all of it? I tilted my head. One mistake? Jessica hesitated. I took a step forward, watching her flinch. Tell me something, Jess. My voice was calm. Did you call it a mistake before I caught you? Or was it only a mistake because now you have to face the consequences? She swallowed hard. Didn't answer. I nodded. That's what I thought. Richard exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples like he was physically restraining himself from tearing into her. Then he snapped. Enough. Jessica and I both turned to him. His voice was like steel, cutting through the room. I have spent my entire life giving you everything, Jessica. Everything. And this, he gestured between us. This is how you repay that? Jessica stiffened. Dad, no. No more lies. Richard's face hardened. Pack your things. You're done here. Jessica let out a breathless, disbelieving laugh. You're taking his side over mine? Richard's eyes flashed with something dangerous. I'm taking the side of the person who didn't destroy their own marriage. Jessica sputtered. I'm your daughter. Richard didn't blink. And he is the only one in this room acting like family. Silence. Jessica's mouth opened, then closed. I saw it sink in, the realization that for the first time in her life, her father wasn't going to save her. And that's when she truly panicked. Fine. Her voice turned sharp, bitter. You want to throw me out? Go ahead. But you'll regret it, both of you. She turned on her heel, storming up the stairs. Her footsteps pounded against the wood. Richard exhaled slowly, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Jesus Christ. I didn't say anything. Just watched the staircase, listening as drawers slammed, hangers scraped against metal, the sounds of Jessica ripping through her own life, trying to figure out what to take with her. She was scrambling, not just for clothes or belongings, but for some sense of power. Some way to walk out of this without feeling like she'd lost. But she had. She had lost everything. And I wasn't done yet. Jessica stomped down the stairs 15 minutes later, dragging 2 suitcases behind her. Her jaw was tight, her eyes blazing with resentment. She looked at me like she wanted me to burn. "I hope you're happy." I was. She shoved past me, yanking open the front door, but then she hesitated, 1 second, 2, a brief flicker of doubt. Then her head snapped toward Richard, eyes narrowing. "And you," she spat. "You're a hypocrite." Richard slowly turned to face her. "Excuse me?" Jessica's lips curled. "You act so high and mighty, so morally righteous, but let's not forget you weren't exactly the perfect husband either, were you?" There it was, a last-ditch effort. A desperate, pathetic attempt to pull him down with her. Richard barely reacted. "Is that really where you're going with this?" Jessica gave a cold, bitter laugh. "You, of all people, should understand. You should be on my side." Richard took a slow step forward, his voice low, measured. "Let me make something very clear, Jessica. Yes, I made mistakes in my life. But do you know what I didn't do? I didn't laugh in my wife's face when I hurt her. I didn't take pleasure in her pain, and I sure as hell didn't act like the victim when I was the one who caused the damage." Jessica's jaw clenched. Richard exhaled sharply. "I may not be perfect, but at least I have the decency to own up to what I've done. Can you say the same?" Jessica's mouth opened, but nothing came out because she couldn't say the same, and she knew it. Her grip on the suitcase tightened. "Screw you." The words were sharp, ugly, but the fury behind them? It wasn't fear of me, or of Richard. It was fear of herself. Because deep down, beneath all the arrogance, all the gaslighting, and manipulation, she knew exactly what she was. A liar. A cheater. A woman who destroyed her own life with her own hands. She turned away, stepping outside. I followed, but not to stop her, to watch. I wanted to see her walk away. I wanted that final image burned into my mind. Jessica dragging her own bags down the driveway, forced to leave the life she'd taken for granted. She threw her suitcases into the trunk of her car, then yanked open the driver's side door. But before she got in, she hesitated, then slowly turned back. "You'll regret this." I smiled. "No, Jess. I really won't." Her fingers curled into fists. For a second, I thought she was going to say something else. One final insult. One last attempt to get under my skin. But instead, she got in the car and slammed the door. I stood there, watching as the engine roared to life, as the tires screeched against the pavement. I didn't move, didn't look away. I watched until her car disappeared down the road, until she was nothing but a memory. And then, finally, I exhaled. She was gone. And for the first time in years, I could breathe. The silence left in Jessica's wake was deafening. No more sharp laughter. No more smug little smirks. No more carefully woven lies that twisted around me like vines, squeezing the air from my lungs. Just quiet. I stood in the open doorway, staring down the empty road where her car had vanished. My hands rested at my sides, loose, relaxed, something I hadn't felt in years. Behind me, Richard let out a long, heavy breath. "Jesus!" I turned. He was standing in the entryway, his shoulders slumped, his fingers rubbing the bridge of his nose. The strong, no-nonsense businessman who had once towered over boardrooms now looked exhausted. And I couldn't blame him. His only daughter had just shattered every expectation he'd ever placed on her. I leaned against the doorframe. "You all right?" Richard let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Shouldn't I be asking you that?" I shrugged. "Honestly, I feel pretty damn good." His eyes flicked to me, studying me for a moment before he nodded. "Yeah, I can see that." And he wasn't wrong. Because for the first time in a long, long time, I wasn't weighed down by. The suffocating presence of a woman who never really loved me was gone. Jessica was gone, and I didn't feel a single ounce of grief over it. Richard sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. I still can't believe it. I could. I had spent the last few hours, or maybe even years, watching Jessica unravel, exposing the rot beneath the perfect facade she had spent our entire marriage building. I knew exactly who she was now, and now, so did her father. Richard shook his head, his jaw tightening. I raised her better than this. I didn't respond right away. I could hear the anger laced in his words, not at me, not at the situation, but at himself. Because Richard Caldwell was a man who built his entire life around structure, responsibility, and loyalty. He was a man who thought he had raised a daughter who shared those values. And tonight, he realized he was wrong. I sighed, pushing off the doorframe. You can't blame yourself for this. Richard scoffed. Can't I? He turned, staring out into the night. She didn't become this person overnight. I just didn't want to see it. He wasn't wrong, but I wasn't about to kick him while he was down. So instead, I clapped a hand on his shoulder. I appreciate you having my back. Richard let out a rough chuckle. After what she pulled? Of course. He turned to me, his expression firm. Listen, if she tries anything, money, divorce threats, legal bulls **T, you call me. I'll make sure she doesn't get a damn thing from you. I grinned. I was hoping you'd say that. Richard smirked, but the exhaustion was still there, clinging to him like weight. I should head out. Got an early meeting tomorrow. I nodded. Yeah, thanks again. He gave me one last measuring look, then clapped my shoulder before heading out the door. I stood there for a moment after he left, letting the silence of the house settle around me. For the first time in 11 years I was alone. No Jessica. No constant tension. No wondering if she actually cared, if she was being honest, if I was the only one fighting for this marriage. Just me. And the realization hit me like a freight train. I should have done this a long time ago. I woke up the next morning to sunlight streaming through the windows. No Jessica beside me. No cold shoulder. No weight pressing down on my chest. For the first time in years I woke up free. I rolled onto my back, staring at the ceiling, letting the silence soak in. No rushed footsteps in the hallway. No hushed phone calls in the bathroom. No pretending. Just peace. I got out of bed, made my own damn coffee, and sat at the kitchen table, letting the events of last night replay in my mind. Jessica's smug little smirk. The way it vanished when she realized she wasn't in control anymore. Her father's disappointment. Her panic when she understood that this time, she wasn't getting away with it. It was done. She was gone. And I had won. My phone buzzed on the table. I glanced at it, expecting a message from Richard, or maybe a legal update. But no. It was Jessica. The text preview sat there like a disease on my screen. We need to talk. I stared at it for a long moment, then set the phone back down, not even bothering to open it. We had nothing to talk about. She made her choice. She laughed in my face. She dragged her suitcases out the door, thinking she still had some kind of leverage over me. But she didn't. Jessica was nothing to me now. I picked up my coffee, took a slow sip, and leaned back in my chair. Let her text. Let her beg. Let her realize, too late, what she threw away. I wasn't wasting another second of my life on her. And for the first time in 11 years, I was truly happy.